Good day. Welcome to lesson 54 in our study of the book of Romans. And today we're going to finish chapter 15 from verse 22 to the end. Now it's important to understand that all of these writings that Paul has been doing to the church in Rome, he did before he ever left on the journey. He was never in Rome. And this was really expressing his desire and his teaching to the church in Rome in anticipation of his visiting that city. And this is sort of when he summarizes up this entire treatise by now expressing his desire once again to visit the church in Rome. And he says that he had been busy preaching all around Jerusalem, to Illyricum, to all these areas throughout Asia Minor. This is the reason he did not get to Rome before this. And he says in verse 22, "For this reason I also have been much hindered from coming to you. But now, no longer having a place in these parts, and having a great desire these many years to come to you, whenever I journey to Spain, I shall come to you. For I hope to see you on my journey, and to be helped on my way there by you. If first I may enjoy your company for a while. But now I am going to Jerusalem to minister to the saints, for it pleased those from Macedonia and Achaia to make a certain contribution for the poor among the saints who are in Jerusalem. It pleased them indeed, and they are their debtors. For if the Gentiles have been partakers of their spiritual things, their duty is also to minister to them in material things. Therefore, when I have performed this and have sealed to them this fruit, I shall go by way of you to Spain. But I know that when I come to you, I shall come in the fullness of the blessing of the gospel of Christ." Paul is saying that he was hoping to get to Rome, hoping to get all the way to Spain, hoping to get to Rome, though, in the meantime, and that he was held up because of his teachings around Jerusalem and throughout the surrounding areas. And he says that I have been hindered from coming to you, but because I have now done the duty here. Now what he did was that he would go from place to place and convert small groups of people and set up a small church. And then he would go on somewhere else and allow these people in the church to further enlarge the church body, to further bring other converts into the faith. And therefore he would sort of plant the church and then move on. And he did this throughout many of the small towns and areas around Jerusalem. And now he says, I have no more need to linger in this part of the area, and therefore I am going to go to Spain and hopefully come to Rome on the way. But he says, first, I'm going back to Jerusalem to minister to the saints there, to give a contribution that the churches from Macedonia and Achaia had given to the saints in the church in Rome. Now this was very clever, because Paul had encouraged these Gentile churches to make a contribution to the Jewish churches in Rome. And still in this time, there was great animosity between the Jews and the Gentiles, even though both groups were now involved in the church. And by having the Gentile churches, the churches mainly composed of Gentile people, make a contribution to the churches mainly composed of Jewish people in Jerusalem, therefore it sort of brought the two together. And this was a very good plan, a very good action on the part of Paul. Now Paul says he had to go to Jerusalem before he came to Rome in order to give this contribution, or this fruit as he puts it, to the people in Jerusalem. Now there seem to be two different tracks here, depending upon which commentary or which person you read. Some say that Paul actually was going against the will of God when he did this, that this was something he did on his own. And if he had not done this, he would have made it to Rome and probably to Spain. But he apparently went against what he felt, or what was felt to be God's will for him. And therefore, as a result of that, he ended up in trouble in Jerusalem and did get to Rome, but as a prisoner, not as a free missionary. Others say that he stayed in Jerusalem to do God's unfinished business there in order to support the churches in Jerusalem by the contributions of the churches in Macedonia and Achaia. And therefore he was actually just completing the work that had already been planned out in Jerusalem. And that it was actually Satan that actually set in and caused problems, because in Jerusalem he was arrested and put in prison and did end up going to Rome as a prisoner to appeal to Caesar, not really going in the way he had originally planned. So there seems to be the two different trains of thought in this, but in any case, Paul ended up going back to Jerusalem to give the churches there the gifts, the fruit as he puts it, the gifts that the Gentile churches had raised to give to the Jewish churches in Jerusalem. He ended up going back there, but because there were so many Jews there who were against the church, who were against Paul because of what he had done, of how he had changed from a faithful Jewish person to now a faithful Christian person, there were so many people there who were still against him that he ended up getting in trouble, getting arrested, and ended up in prison, and then eventually going to Rome as a prisoner. Now, because he was in prison, he ended up writing some of the books of the New Testament while he was in prison. Ephesians, Philippians, a few others. These books may never have gotten written if he had not been in the trouble he was in. So it's hard to say exactly which is the correct way to interpret this, but in any way what happened was Paul went to Jerusalem to deliver these gifts from the churches in Macedonia and Achaia. He ended up being arrested. He was thrown in prison. He did some writing, some of the epistles, when he was in prison, and then ended up going to Rome eventually as a prisoner. He never did, according to, as far as we can determine, make it to Spain as he had anticipated and planned. So Paul's now writing this still in anticipation of coming to Rome. He's writing this whole treatise, this whole book of Romans. And he says he wants to get there. I hope to see you on the journey which he's going to make, although he did make it, although as a prisoner, not as a free man. And he's going to Jerusalem to administer these gifts that the churches in Macedonia and Achaia had raised for the saints or the people who were in Jerusalem. And he says if the Gentiles have been participators of the spiritual benefits of Christianity, then they should relate, as we all should, to others in material things. Duty is to administer them in material things. So when he did this and ended up in trouble, ended up in prison, he ended up coming to the people in Rome as a prisoner in an attempt to appeal to Caesar for his freedom. And it says, but when he does come, he will come in the fullness of the blessing of the gospel of Christ. Even though he was a prisoner, even though he had not come as a free man, he still felt that he was coming in the blessings of Christ because of what had preceded him and of his feelings and of his desire to come there in any regard. And then he says, now I beg you, brethren, through the Lord Jesus Christ and through the love of the Spirit, that you strive together with me in prayers. What he's saying, that he wants people to pray earnestly, not just superficially, but to pray deeply, to strive, to be very complete in their prayers, to strive with him together in prayers to God for me, that I may be delivered from those in Judea who do not believe. These are the ones who obviously had taken him and had helped contribute to his being in prison, that I may be delivered from those in Judea. Pray that I may be delivered from those in Judea. Pray that my service for Jerusalem may be acceptable to the saints, that what he was doing in Jerusalem, while he was lingering there, may be what the people in Jerusalem needed, so that he may be acceptable to the saints, and that he later may come to you with joy and gratitude and joy by the will of God, and therefore may be refreshed, may be encouraged, may be supported by those in Rome, and have those in Rome support him. These were the three things he prayed for. Now, Paul had prayed before that he would come to Rome. And he would come to Rome, presumably as a free person. But his prayers to go to Spain, his prayers to go to Rome as a free person were not answered. And this shows that even those saints, even those people who are closest to God, sometimes their prayers are not answered the way they expect. This is an example for us, who often don't feel that our prayers are answered. But Paul was saying that he wanted to still come to Rome, and he still wanted to come with the blessings of the gospel of Christ. He prayed for three things. He prayed that he may be delivered from those people in Jerusalem who did not believe, that he may be a blessing to those people in Jerusalem who were saints who did believe, and he may come with joy to the people in Rome to whom he wished to visit. And this was sort of the end up of the prayer that he was giving. And the ending of this is doxology, if you want to use that word. That I may come to you with joy by the will of God, and may be refreshed together with you. And now he is saying that may the God of peace be with you all. This was another terminology he used for God. He used other terminologies in other places in the epistles, but in this case he wants to use may the God of peace come to you, probably because he himself was in prison, coming as a prisoner, and he was hoping that there would be peace for everyone. So now may the God of peace be with you all. Amen. So this is rather a short lesson in a sense that it is really a finishing up or a culmination of what Paul has been saying before. And now that he has finished giving his teaching for all intents and purposes, he now is finishing up why he was delayed and not coming to Jerusalem and to deliver what he was going to say to them in person, but had to write this letter, this epistle, instead. And perhaps in our time, it's good that he was delayed, because otherwise we might not have had this letter to the Romans, a piece of literature which is considered even by secular people to be one of the greatest pieces of writing in all of English and all of literature. And therefore Paul is now saying again why he was delayed, what he did to delay him, that he was arrested because he went back to Jerusalem, put in jail, and now that he was going to come to Rome, he hoped to go to Spain, but did not make it, as far as we know, ever to that country. So he wants the people to pray for him, as we all need prayer. He himself asked for prayer for those three reasons: that he could be delivered from those in Judea, that he would be a blessing to those who did believe in Jerusalem, and that he would come with joy, a form of joy and peacefulness to those in Rome, and so that they would be refreshed by being together. This is why he said, may the God of peace be with you all. So this ends chapter 15. The last chapter in the book is starting next, and we'll start this next week as we do the first few verses of chapter 16 in the book of Romans. But this is all for today. Thanks for watching. Bye for now. Hope to see you next week.